Tara Reade, former Senate aide who accused then-Senator Joe Biden of sexually assaulting her while she worked as a staffer in his Senate office 3 decades ago, announced last week that she had moved to Russia because she feels safer there. Since Reade's interview with Russian state-run network Sputnik, the mainstream media published that she defected, a characterization she and her lawyer strongly condemn.
In a statement, Reade's counsel, Radha Stirling, denounced the headlines, writing, quote, "Despite this week's tabloid headlines, she has not defected to Russia, nor is she seeking asylum. During a week-long trip to Moscow to oversee her book translation, she was told her life was in danger if she returned to the U.S. On advice she is staying on while we ensure her safety." Here to tell us firsthand about her experience is Tara Reade and her lawyer, Radha Stirling, a crisis manager and founder of Due Process International. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's our pleasure, of course, to be able to have this conversation with you. Tara, let's start by talking about how you feel your move to Russia has been mischaracterized. You know, if this is not a defection, what is it, and what prompted the move, this threat to your safety?
Well, I think, Bree, you know, you were kind of front and center witness, as was Robbie, to how I was treated by the mainstream corporate media when I came forward in 2019 and 2020. Basically, I was just out the gate, I was called a Russian asset. I had no ties to Russia. I had no affiliations. And then through 2020, I was attacked. I had personal physical attacks to my safety, to my family. You know, I was threatened with my life. I had a break-in. My daughter's house was broken into. She was threatened. She had to get a restraining order. My horse was being threatened to kidnap. I mean, it was a mess all of 2020. I couldn't get work. People would tell me that I was a security risk. And so I finally got a job with RT doing some op-eds, and I did not conceal it. I was very open about it, talked about, you know, working at RT. It wasn't very much money. And then I went forward with that. And still continue to get hassled and just called a Russian agent and all these horrible things. And eventually, my book came out in 2020 in COVID, and many authors had trouble. And on top of mine was suppressed. And as you have reported out, the FBI and DOJ worked on suppressing people on Twitter and other social media. On Facebook, for instance, my name in 2020, Tara Reade, was called election interference. So they kept deflecting the conversation from the allegations I made of being raped in 1993 by Joe Biden when I worked for him, and no Russians were present. And coming forward about that, they kept trying to deflect the conversation, and I got caught up in that Russian sort of narrative. So recently, my book was being offered to have international translation, and that's what brought me to Moscow. And I went ahead and went to Moscow. While I was there, I had several conversations with people who are experts in the field who gave me a warning that they were very concerned about my safety.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that to whatever extent you're possible? Were the people warning you that you were in trouble? Was it Russian people or people back in the States?
It was American. It was Americans. Yeah.
Law enforcement?
It was Americans that would know. It was Americans that would know. And bear in mind, too, you know, the physical threats already have happened, and they started amping up again in 2023. And I don't know if you saw the viral tweet where I said, you know, look, I'm not suicidal. I'm not going to have an accident. That was because I was getting physically targeted again. And it was during that time I was talking to Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and did an interview, and I was set to testify. So that was all happening simultaneously. So it was based on that, but also they gave me a specific warning about a possible Interpol red notice, which I don't know international law, and I think Radha could speak more eloquently and describe what that means. But it was, you know, unsettling. I talked with Matt Gaetz, and he didn't give me advice. He gave me information. He basically said, Tara, you know, I'm concerned for your physical safety.
So and that's who you're referring to is political elected representatives who have warned you about your safety.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Raja, maybe you want to jump in here and elaborate on exactly what the nature of that threat of the Interpol report. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tara received information from former intelligence or members of the community that she was either her life may have been at risk and definitely her freedom, and that she may have been reported to the Interpol Red Notice database, which, if she had left Russia at that time, would have likely led to her arrest en route back to the US in Turkey, where they could have kept her indefinitely, essentially, facing unknown charges or unknown allegations. Now, Interpol is regularly used by authoritarian states as a means to harass people abroad, to have them arrested and subject to extradition proceedings, even if that country knows that they're not going to win. So it could definitely lead to her arrest. So we've already lodged filings with Interpol to find out if she's on the database. And if she is, I've also lodged preemptive documents that would prevent them, hopefully, from accepting a notice from the US in the future. Now, if Tara had returned to the US, she was extremely concerned that she would be detained potentially until after the next election.
So, Radha, I just want to make sure I understand. Do you have any sense of what charges, what basis they would have retained Tara? And moreover, is the feeling that there could not have been a direct flight back to the United States, that the concern was being interceded in Turkey or wherever else a layover would have happened?
There was no direct flight back to the US, so she would have to go via a third-party country where she could have been detained. Alternatively, she could be detained in the US under, it could be anything. These days, we've seen the way that the authorities have weaponized the justice system there for political gain. So they may have arrested her with some allegation that she is a Russian agent, or that she has, she's a domestic terrorist or anything to that effect. And they don't really need to provide that evidence in order to detain her for lengthy periods of time. So I think anyone, when faced with that risk, would say, do I really want to go back right now? Or do I want to stay here and see whether my lawyers can get to the bottom of it, whether I can perhaps be assured protection when I testify at Congress about this very weaponization and about what happened with Joe Biden in the 90s. And I think at this point, Tara had really no option but to stay in Russia.
So it's more, when you describe feeling being explicitly warned that you would not necessarily be safe returning to the country. It's not the safety aspect of it is more that government forces, either on your way back to the U.S. or even at the U.S., you have some sense that they might be after you, not like your life is in danger because a third party or something is coming to kill you or something. It's actually a government threat of arrest and detention.
It's both, actually. I've been physically targeted, Robbie. And, like the other day, one of the FBI whistleblowers, the FBI said to a congresswoman, they couldn't guarantee that whistleblower wouldn't be killed. He was testifying against Biden about the bribery case. So these are very serious. I mean, I've been targeted physically several times. I don't know by who. I made police reports like one does. I actually went to federal law enforcement when it first happened in 2020, not knowing that they were actually going after me. And also remember that I have a sealed case that we still don't know what it is, with a grand jury impaneled, and it's been sealed for 3 years, and they can indict on whatever it is at any time.
I think, Tara, just to try to raise, some of the questions that more skeptical audience members might have, they might ask, well, given that you have been the victim of some threats or attacks in the past, and that so much of that centered around the events of 2020 and people who were frustrated that you raising your allegations at that time, and of course you had raised them many, many years in advance, but the allegations coming up at that point was going to threaten Joe Biden's presidential chances, et cetera. Given that that was kind of the temporal locus of all of that activity, why now do you feel as though there is a level of threat that justifies or might require you to extend your time in Russia? And also, why Russia as opposed to some other countries, given the subtext of what it means to stay in Russia in America's current political climate?
Well, to answer your question fully, I was here for 7 days, right? I mean, I literally only packed 7 days worth of clothes, so I don't even have a coat. And I had been so happy because I got this book, deal arranged where I was having my book translated, and then another additional book accepted for next September. So I was thinking I could go back and forth between America and Russia. I've just never bought into the Russophobia and the narrative because, as you know, most of it has been like the Steele dossier was turned over. It was false. It was fake. All of this has been fake. I mean, Russia is a capitalistic country like the United States. They don't want to be our enemy. We're not in a war officially with them. So why are they calling it defection or an enemy nation? So really what this is more about, it's not even about that. It's more about, I just wanted to testify before Congress about Joe Biden and what happened in 1993. And I have been terrorized and marginalized to the point where I literally sought sanctuary because for me to fly home could have meant me walking into a jail cell where, as you know, the new laws allow them to hold people for several months without charges and without counsel. So that would have been very convenient for Joe Biden, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we have, I've commented on the show many times about how I believe you were treated so differently from other people who made Me Too accusations in the reception you got from the mainstream media, a kind of automatic skepticism that was just not extended to so many of these other instances where it was automatic belief and it has to be, the burden is on to disprove it, where in your case it seemed like the media was operating in a more, well, no, the burden is on her to prove it, we're not going to automatically believe it. So I absolutely understand, and I witnessed that total discrepancy. Do you think Do you expect you're going to be staying in Russia for some time now? And are you still in contact with Representative Matt Gaetz or anyone else of that kind vis-a-vis what your situation might be here if you were to return? Do you have someone, contact in government, maybe someone like a political representative who could arrange for you to return and feel that you wouldn't be under the threat of arrest?
That's a good question. I'll let Radha address it, but I'll address this portion of it that, yes, we're still communicating with Representative Matt Gaetz. I still wish, and she'll explain the legal process of doing that, of testifying before Congress. I will not be bullied. I'm not going to be marginalized. I am going to testify. And Robbie, and Bree, just on a human level, and Bree knows this, I went to Bernie Sanders, AOC. I went to these representatives before I went public for help. No one helped me, and no one's really helping me now. And look at my life. They took a wrecking ball to my life, a wrecking ball. My life was destroyed, and I'm now facing, my daughter, my pets. I don't know when I'll ever see them again. So for me to make this decision, it had to be serious because it's life altering, and and I don't know what's going to happen. So I'll let Radha, come in.
We understand it, and we so appreciate you being willing to speak about your situation. Radha, please jump in and maybe give your perspective on how a return could be facilitated, ideally.
When will you find out about whether Tara's on an Interpol list or any other kind of list that would jeopardize her travel back to the United States?
Now, unfortunately, with Interpol, they're a very slow-working mechanism. So they would respond to us within 4 months is what they allow themselves, and we'll know at that point. But it's not just the Interpol warrant that we're concerned about. We can deal with that. If she's listed on Interpol, we'll have her removed, and that takes away that international risk, so to speak. It's more what would happen if she returned to the US. And right now, what I'm seeing is she's been forced into a position. Tara's been forced into staying in Russia. This was not her choice. She has been forced into that position. And now what we're seeing is even the fact that she's there, not by choice, is being weaponized. If we look at the headlines of this week, we're seeing that she defected. She must have always been a Russian spy, a Russian asset. We're seeing articles come out where journalists have received comments and opinions from, former intelligence officers saying she was an asset. This is probably a Russian agent, or if she's not right now a Russian agent, she probably will be. Just by the fact that she's in Russia, she'll be recruited. So that's putting her at serious risk. They didn't reach out to us and ask us for comment. They didn't reach out to Tara and say, what about these rumors about you defecting to Russia? They just printed this opinion. And to me, that looks like an intelligence operation designed to discredit Tara and to put her further at risk of actually being charged with a crime like espionage or similar. Or now that she's in Russia, these rumors about violating sanctions and all sorts of things. So they're actually compounding her risk and making her feel even less safe to return to Russia. So we need to be doing a lot of work in the US to uncover this sealed indictment against her. We don't know what that is. And they could arrest her at any time, especially with the upcoming election. So right now, she's definitely not safe. And we're working towards trying to get some assurances. We've been liaising with various, Matt Gaetz and other people to see what sort of protection they might be able to offer or assurances. And we've seen the response that Tara should not feel at risk. But the fact that that response is even coming from that department is telling in itself that her profile is raised up so far and is being reviewed by intelligence agents in the United States who could be formulating unfair cases against her to lead to her wrongful arrest. So right now, on legal advice from myself and a US attorney, Jonathan Levy, we are saying you are definitely not safe right now to return. And no other country, Russia is the safest place for her to be. If she went to a European country or Turkey, for example, the US can actually get her arrested there or make an extradition request, and she'd be locked up while she's fighting against that unfair extradition request, even if she ultimately won it.
Yeah, Radha, we did just cover yesterday a story of a gray zone journalist who was detained in London and interrogated for hours because on some level there was some skepticism about his reporting and accusations of a similar nature about him being a Russian asset, et cetera. So it certainly isn't a cynical or paranoid concern at all. It is happening. I guess I think the question that people are going to have is, how did it come to be that this framing, if it was your choice to extend your trip in Russia until you could guarantee that you weren't on an Interpol warrant list, or to raise the profile of your concerns, the threats to your freedom, such that if the United States or if the government tried to intercede and did keep you in custody, then there would be a big international to-do, and at the very least they would have to justify it in a way that could be very embarrassing on the public stage. It seems like you have accomplished that on some level, right? It seems like now there is enough attention being paid to this, to your point, Radha, that do you feel more safe at this time saying, well, I could travel because the United States would have a hard time justifying my detention and would lend credibility to my claim that I am being targeted?
No, in a sense, so I would say that in a sense, raising this issue will fight back a little bit against them, and hopefully they will see this as a huge red flag not to further intimidate her. But it could have actually been part of their plan to keep Tara in Russia, where they could then divert attention onto the whole Russian element of it rather than on the allegations themselves. And in that way, they've almost won, at least in the Democrat media.
But that's the issue, right, Radha? So people are going to say, well, if you felt unsafe coming back to the United States, then why Russia, given how that's going to be framed? And is it possible at this point to go to another country with whom there is no extradition relationship with the United States to cut against the presumption of collusion and all of the kind of Russia-phobic accusations that there are?
Unfortunately, even countries that don't have an extradition treaty with the US does not mean that you won't be extradited. At any time, you can make an extradition request regardless of whether there's a treaty in place. So Russia really right now is the safest place. She's already there, and we would recommend that she stay there and not travel until we've sorted it out.
Tara, I want to give you the final word. If the narrative is that you have defected to Russia, and that this, from a mainstream media perspective, they're saying this justifies the skepticism they've had all along of the things that you've said, the experience you related, the horrific experience you related having to do with Joe Biden all those years ago. What do you want to say to those critics that say this shows that we were right because we said this was a Russian-based smear, and now here is this person residing in Russia. So this bears out our criticism. Again, that's not coming from me. I want to give you a chance to address the people in other media outlets who are saying that.
I understand. What I want to say is that there's been a huge coordinated effort at great expense by the Democratic National Committee and the Biden administration to silence, suppress what happened in 1993. No Russians were there when I was sexually assaulted by Joe Biden at work, at the Congress. That was Senator Joe Biden that did that. I went forward then in 1993 and filed, the sexual harassment and wanted to file the more information about the sexual assault. I tried to get help. I tried to get help in 2019. I tried to get help in 2020, and this is the result. I'm here. I was here for a book deal. There's a lot of disinformation about Russia. It's a beautiful country. They've given me sanctuary. And, and I've sought, I wasn't planning on seeking asylum, but my circumstances necessitate me being safe. And that came directly from a U.S., member of Congress, as well as other people, experts that would know, not just me. So I made this decision. It was a very grave decision. It was very thoughtful. But while I'm here, I'm going to do my best, we're going to prefer Congress is what it's called, so that I can testify remotely. And, at this point, my life was really wrecked, right? But I really want this playbook to not work anymore, because if I allow them to silence me and destroy me, they will keep doing this to every single whistleblower. So at this point, I'm trying to do this for the people behind me and that are trying to come forward. And I hope that works. I hope I'm able to testify before Congress.
Tara, just to ask quickly, and maybe Radha, you know something about this as well. Did Matt Gaetz give any corroborating evidence or say anything specific about how he's aware that you might be threatened by the U.S. intelligence agencies or what have you?
Tara, you were in communication with Matt.
Yeah. What does
he
Matt
told me.
Gaetz...
He told me directly over the phone, Bree. Like, I was in a phone conference with him, and I spoke directly with legal counsel and with Matt Gaetz. And when I was in a direct conversation with him, he very clearly told me that he was very concerned, not just with, he couldn't do anything about immunity. He gave me that information, because he didn't know what cases they were bringing. It's sealed. But he did say, Tara, I'm really concerned about your physical safety. I'm worried for you.
Tara, I guess the question is, why? What is the basis of Matt Gaetz' concern? Because, one could say, I would be worried about you generally speaking, just because of the nature of your allegations and the nature of the political climate in 2020. But the idea of it coming from a sitting congressperson suggests that he is privy to knowledge about what's happening behind the scenes that would raise the generalized concern level to something closer to an immediate threat. So I wonder if he said anything to give you confidence that he's speaking to some specific pending threat against you, as opposed to speaking more generally about kind of the political climate and third-party threats and things like that?
I think you would have to ask him directly. That's what he told me on the phone, and that's where he ended the conversation. And, you've seen now the Congress, talking, other members of Congress talking about other whistleblowers having the same conundrum, having the same problem of their physical safety being threatened. So 2 of them right now. One of them is trying to also testify, I think, remotely, is really scared. And then the other one was the one I mentioned earlier that just came out where the FBI said, look, we can't guarantee their safety, that they won't be killed. I think what we need to focus the energy on is Biden. Why is our government operating like a mafia state? Why is Joe Biden allowed to intimidate, suppress, and control the narrative so much that people are afraid to testify truth? That's what has to be. Those are the questions.
We'll be following up with Representative Gaetz and really trying to get to the bottom of whatever legal threat you might be facing, because this should still be the United States and everyone able to express dissent consistent with the First Amendment and all the other rights you should be granted. Radha, thank you for joining us. And Tara, thank you so much for being willing to speak with us about your situation and hopefully shed more light on what's going on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.